Olá, buenos dias, me chamo Pedro. Oh, there we go, okay. I'm a bit confused. So I work at Adbusters for 10 years now. And Adbusters, it's started with a foundation. I don't know if all of you know, but I kind of prepared a little bit of material to show what the magazine and the foundation works with, right? So, back in 1989, two people, Kale and Bill, they were two advertisers. They worked with advertising, but they were more like creatives. They saw an advert on television. That's the Canadian logging industry created an advert, the typical mindfuck ad. They said, in order to save a forest, we need to cut the forest, right? It's typical like bullshit. And then they saw the advert and they decided to make a response to the ad. They started to talk back. So they made an advert, got the money from friends, and went to CBS, Canadian Broadcast System, with money to say, hey, we want to show this ad on television. And CBS was like, what's your institution? What's your corporation? Where are you coming from? And they said, we're just people. And then they said, you can't do that. We can't accept it. You can't show commercials on televisions. People can't show commercials on televisions. You have to be an institution or a corporation or so forth. So they went back home and they founded Adbusters, the institution. And Adbusters at the time, they launched a magazine because it was the most effective way to combat these narratives. Adbusters magazine, it started off from the idea of the environment. It started off as a green idea of coming out of the environmentalists and what the actual environmentalists were doing. Now, let me explain in terms of narratives. We never had adverts in our magazine, and this makes a single journey. You see, you walk through the magazine and you flip through the magazine, and there's one single story being told. And it's like a short film. Imagine that there's the short film is a magazine that has all this one line, and a normal magazine will be like TV program with commercial breaks. So you know like how TV works, right? So it's 15-minute slots and commercial breaks in between. On the TV slot, 15 minutes, there is a crescendo of what's happening, and when it gets to the top, it leaves with a cliffhanger. So you wait for the next after the commercial breaks. And the commercial breaks comes in, so you feel of anxiety in television, and then the commercial breaks comes in to kind of like satisfy all of the anxiety that you kind of like created. So the magazine being about, it's a journey. It's like a single story, and maybe it's the single story of one individual. Maybe it's a single story of what does it mean to be alive in the world today. We as people, each of one of us, you know, how do we relate to the world that we live, you know, individually, with our communities, with our families, and so forth. Or perhaps is the story of humanity, of our species. What is the project that we are creating on planet Earth? Why did we decide to go this way and not that way? So what Adbusters started as a project for environmentalism, it quickly moved on to what it's called mental environmentalism. Because the same way we can pollute physically our rivers, cut forests, and so forth, we can do so mentally. We can pollute our airwaves, we can create visual pollution, noise pollution, and so forth. This is a great example. So we all can talk a lot about brands and name the brands really quick, but we have no idea the names of plants. I was once lost in São Paulo countryside, and I stopped the car and I asked to a farmer, like, excuse me, I need to get to this house. Can you help me? And he said, yeah, fine. Just go here. When you see a pear tree, oh, it was an apple tree, turn left. And I was like, thank you. So I start driving. I'm like, what does an apple tree look like? Right? Have you seen an apple tree? I mean, would you be able to recognize it? So it kind of like it tells you a lot of the kind of world we live in today. So, Adbuses used a lot of inspiration from the French situationists, in particular with the concept of the French situationists. If you don't know them, they had a profound critique of capitalism and consumerism. And please look it up. They have this graffiti, like it's a huge library of graffiti that was done in 1968 on the streets. And is it working now? Yeah. Oh, okay, thank you. So this one just says, never work. And one of my favorite ones, I couldn't find an image. So you can't buy happiness, steal it. So he had this idea of subverting of capitalism, as we know it. And they had a beautiful concept, which was the concept of détournement. And détournement, if you would put in today's words, it would be hacking. It's almost like a detour. It's like hijacking something, right? And Adbusters used that to hijack the power and the messages that the corporations were creating during the 80s and started to talk back. And these people, this is before the internet. This is super important, you know. When you have the radio and TV, you have just one way. People just sit down and they're passive consumers. And with the internet, it comes with the idea of actually talking back. Now, this happens in the beginning of the 90s, right? It's when they start to actually respond to the ads, you know. And the funny thing is that in the beginning, corporations wanted to sue us. So Absolute went like, fuck, okay, this is bad, you know. So they tried to sue us. And Adbusters did such a huge, loud response to it that Absolute decided not to go for it, you know, in a sense. They gave up. And ever since, no one else sort of tried to, in a sense, because they know that if they try to sue or censorship, they kind of become this image, you know. And this was during the 90s. And you guys have to, during the 90s, 80s and 90s, like end of the 80s and 90s, pop culture was consolidated. They realized that the power of images was everything. Nike didn't sponsor culture. Nike was the culture. So this really, the corporations started to realize the powerfulness of images that their brands have represented, in a sense, you know. They weren't selling a product, they were selling a lifestyle. And Adbusters was in the middle of this, kind of like fighting back, trying to sort of recapture the imagination of things. This is Joe Kimmel. Joe Kimmel is Joe Camel doing chemotherapy because he has lung cancer. This is one of the ones we sort of show around as well. It was created by the government of California. Fashion, Calvin Klein, beauty markets, and so forth, right? So all of these subvertisements, what we call them, or culture jam, leads us to campaigns. And Buy Nothing Day is one of the most famous campaigns that Adbusters produce, mainly because it's one day in America is Black Friday, and internationally is Saturday, the next Saturday. So it's a day that you encourage not to shop. 24 hours, zero consumption. And it's not really about the shopping. It's about making you think, what's the difference between what do you have, what do you need, what do you want? What is our corporate consumerist lifestyles doing to yourself, to the planet, to the world? As you kind of get old, I stayed in my friend's house here in Barcelona, and I came to Barcelona 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, I came to my friend's house, and we would get drunk and go out and party and everything. And 15 years later, I'm sitting down with my friend, 7 a.m., and we're meditating, drinking tea, going to bed at 10 o'clock. So it's kind of like you start to realize how many things you sort of need, and they're different in life. I think that there's always like different. So the beautiful thing about this campaigns and that Adbusters sort of created, which I truly think it was ahead of its time, because when Adbusters created the campaign, he just wanted to create a spark. It was just like one idea out there. He didn't want to control it. He didn't want to sort of like curate it and say, okay, we need to go this way or that way. No, it was just like one idea, poof, there you go, just go. And people would take the idea and do things with it, would create different sorts of directions. And this was multiplying what already was a multiple. So in England, for example, they were dressed as zombies and go to the super mall. And kind of like, it was like a bunch of zombies walking in the mall, the shopping mall. In Japan, they would all dressed up as Santa Claus and meditate in the mall. So you walk in to buy like your Christmas shoppings, and there were like a bunch of Santa Claus like meditating in the mall, questioning the idea of consumption and so forth. And the beautiful thing is that each group sort of took on the idea and created their own thing, which kind of brings me to Occupy Wall Street. We were very inspired by the Indignados movement in Arab Spring back in 2010, 2011. We were publishing a lot of things in the magazine. We were publishing the photos, the articles, the texts, the ideas. And we kept thinking how to bring this to America. What would be the idea to bring this to America? And the major point meant a lot for Adbusters, because Adbusters was starting to think that battling a mental environment had to shift to something else. And that shift was to economics. Because economics is at the heart of the project we're doing on planet Earth. Is the one thing people can't fuck with it. If you try to move finance, if you try to touch finance, you get shot, people get killed, countries go to war in order not to touch this. And the idea was let's make this at the center of the heart of the finance of the world, which was Wall Street. And the idea came about, and it was this, hashtag Occupy Wall Street, September 17th, bring tent. And we decided to make this poster, and we did these posters in the magazine, and the poster came out, and the whole Occupy movement started because of this image. And I love this. I think that it tells you a lot about the world that we live in as well, that you have like a whole political movement sort of expanding out of one image, out of one meme, right? But at the end, and after this, Adbusters got a lot of attention. There was a lot of traction, a lot of donations, a lot of subscriptions and so forth. We got all the money and we invested in a book. And the book's called Memoirs, The Creative Destruction of Neoclassical Economics. And it's a very thick book, and you can't really see it, but the hardcover, it's made out of sandpaper. And because it's an economics book, you're gonna go to the economics section. So every time you put the book and take out the book, it destroys all the other books around because it's sandpaper, so it's kind of typical, like super simple. This is a few spreads of the book. Again, we're questioning the idea of an unending growth in a limited planet. And we question the idea that this idea of neoliberalism and where financial capitalism is taking us, it's futureless. And we've been saying this shit for a long time. So, so we always discuss the idea of like plantations of rice in the US, plantations of rice in the East. So the difference between West and East in terms of there are other alternatives to be thought of in a sense. So I grew up in a world that everything was promised to me. It was like, don't worry about it. Trust the governments. Pay your bills. Pay your taxes. You're going to be fine. Just let the leaders take care of you. Let the corporations take care of you. Nothing bad is going to happen. And I grew up in an idea where this graph meant everything. All of my friends, all they wanted was to get rich. You know, the whole idea of the more is better. The narrative of money was always the really sort of major narrative. And I think right now, we're broke. You have fascist risings. You have the economic collapsing. You have everybody completely mesmerized, playing Candy Crush alone in their own little sort of box. And you have corporations being able to buy your attention for, and we can't actually, we're junkies for it. You know, now we're beginning sort of to understand, but it might be too late, you never know. And you have revelations like Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, that really tells you how the world explains. So it's like right now, it's a really, really horrible time to sort of, if you put all the pieces together, in a sense, you have the fascist rises after 2011 and all the promise that we had. What happens now? You have Trump, you have Brexit, and so forth. So in 2016, the end of it, I came here by the invitation of Bernardo Viranella Prado in Madrid, and we spent 6 days kind of together. Trump had just won. And we spent 6 days, and we didn't say the word Trump once. We were worried, and we were busy working on different things, working on actual ideas to help within the city. And this is a major improvement and a major idea that the Zapatistas, they put out a call last year, and they said, stop using media, social media, to group. Start meeting. Start looking eye to eye. Start spending time together. Start eating together. Share time. Because it's with time like this that we can create new process, we can create accidents, we can understand how to let go and create new things. It's by doing groups. And I think just what Bernardo said, sometimes you create nice ideas, sometimes you germinate ideas. Sometimes some of you would come out of here with something in your head and it would germinate 6 months from now. We have no idea. But the importance of spending time together and really thinking and trying to point to different directions where one could go, it's super important. Today, every government is a brand. Every politician, it's a symbol. We are allowed to hack anything. It's up to us, really. Thank you.